Hello everybody, my name is Ian Kirkpatrick. I am an author and robot simulation specialist, if you ask the computer in me. And today we're going to be talking about editing, editor types, what stages you should get them, should you get them. It's an expensive area to go in, and to prep you for future parts of your story after the first draft, maybe probably after the second draft, and other opportunities maybe instead of hiring editors because they are expensive, but you do need them. First point, you do need an editor. Check out my video at the end of this. You do need an editor, always. With my own issues, I've been through my books so many times, had so many other people look at them, still have editing issues. So it's okay to still have editing issues after you've had editors to some extent, but you're never gonna catch your most egregious problems, I promise you. You're gonna be like, this looks great, and then somebody is gonna look at something and be like, girl, how did you miss this? So, follow me on this journey of editor types. There are 9 different editors we're going to cover today, but before we get started, you can join the Paddy Wagon by clicking the link in the description down below. For the October Lemois, I give you a prompt, you write a story of up to 750 words, submit it, and I read it next month, and we have a good time, maybe with some hot chocolate or some cider because it is November next month. So, join us, write a story, share your story. It'll be so much fun. So there's that, and also, my novel, Dead End Drive, is now currently available at all your favorite bookstores. Link in the description below. Get it, have a good laugh, have a good chortle. Let's go. I know that getting an editor, looking at editing, thinking of editing, can be overwhelming. There are so many different types of editing. It is not just line edits. It's not just Grammarly edits. I used a synonym instead of a cinnamon. It is more than that, but there are options for you out there, okay? And editors should not be looked at as the enemy. They should be looked at as the friend. They are the thing that will help your book usually get to a higher place, a better place, bring out the best part of you. At least that's what they should do. So let's get into what are these different types of editors that can help you write your best story. Editor type number 1 is the developmental editor. Developmental editing is also called content or substantive editing, and it involves the manuscript editor providing detailed feedback on big picture issues like character, plot, pacing. It's basically kind of what I do whenever I'm editing somebody's book, as I go through all of these big things, and not just editing. You'll notice if you look at my book reviews, I kind of do the same thing. It's something similar to what I do when I'm editing a book, and it helps refine your ideas, shape your narrative, and helps you fix major plot issues or character inconsistencies. The developmental editor will look at every element of your story and tell you what works and what doesn't work, and hopefully a good developmental editor will offer you some ways to fix the problems, and you don't have to take those fixes, but they might help you springboard into other fixes that do fit whatever you're trying to do with your narrative. Editor Mary Teresa Hussey says, for a developmental edit, I look at some of the larger questions. Why are the characters behaving as they do? What are their motivations? Do these scenes add to the overall story? What is the underlying theme, and how does it change? End quote. And those are the things that I always look at when I'm reading anything. So maybe that's why I'm so critical of stories when I'm reading stories. Sorry to the authors that, fall victim to my reading eyes. I'm not trying to be a dick. I'm just trying to figure out what the frick you're doing. I promise. So with that said, this is kind of one of the first sorts of editors that you should get when your book is ready to be seen by other eyes, because you might feel super good that everything makes sense, but a developmental editor will tell you if all of your areas are connecting to each other. Now, developmental editing can be very, very expensive when you hire a freelance developmental editor, if you want a good one, because it's so substantive and because they offer, big picture things and they comment on big things. And so you can actually kind of replace developmental editing with a really good critique partner if you find a really good critique partner that helps you work out those kinks in your stories like this. Now, everyone who offers to critique your work might not be able to do this level with you, but if you find a good critique partner who is, devoted to helping you, is very focused on helping you, and you trust them, they should be able to help you with this kind of stuff. Just know, not every critique partner can do substantial developmental editing. But with a developmental editor, you should get an editorial report, which is a general critique of everything that the developmental editor thinks that you should change, or their commentary or responses on things, as well as an annotated manuscript that's marked with that's a marked up version of whatever you sent them, with suggestions or points out where those areas are that need to be fixed. The second type of editor is an editorial assessment. Your manuscript might not yet be ready for developmental edit, so, back scratch on number 1 up there, but you might not be /back. You might not be ready for developmental edit, but you want some feedback on your book to see maybe where you should get it going before you feel like you can submit it to somebody for a full review of what works and what doesn't work. In an editorial assessment, the authors wouldn't receive comments and examples of rewrites in the manuscript. Instead, they would receive a letter that focuses on the broad strokes of the book. So it's kind of like a lower tier developmental editing that still focuses on big issues, but maybe not quite as much. An editorial assessment is best for authors who are early on in the writing process and whose manuscripts might be a bit messier. The third type of editing is structural editing, and that's pretty much, it is what it sounds like. It helps improve your story's structure. An editor will look at your story and look at how the structure, how the pacing, how the information reveal works, and give feedback on if the structure as it's laid out makes sense, if it builds, if it helps itself, or if restructuring might help, such as if your story has a bunch of twists in it, then a flashback structure might work better to increase the suspense than a typical linear chronology. A structural editing can also help you determine where your chapter breaks should be, or where your scene breaks might want to break, or your section breaks if you're doing part 1, part 2, part 3 in your book, and how to order your content, and maybe content that might want to be deleted or expanded on or tightened to help that structure. Developmental edits, like I mentioned before, should address the structure as it is, alongside the plot and the character and themes. This is why developmental editing is so expensive, because it looks at everything, whereas some of these others are breakdowns of individual things that the developmental editor looks at. Number 4 type of editing that you can find is a copy editor. So when you're sure that your developmental editing is done, or your plot is strong and everything is working inside of the story as you kind of want it to, then it's time to move on to the copy editing. A copy editor's job is to bring the author's completed manuscript to a more professional level. A copy editor helps create the most readable version of your book, improving clarity, coherency, consistency, and correctness. The goal is to bridge any remaining gaps between the author's intent and the reader's understanding. So this can mean changing lines so it's more readable, finding where your diction has influenced the words or the phrases, the sentence structures, the paragraph structures in weird ways. We all write like we talk. That's the first thing we need to know. So then when we're reading our work, we know where to put the pauses, and we know that we speak with weird idiosyncrasies, and we might not even notice that we're talking weird until that book goes into somebody else's hands, and then they don't really understand how we're speaking or these pauses. I remember seeing Rick Moody in person, so we had to read his short story collection, Demonology, and that man loves his commas, okay? But I couldn't understand why there were so many commas. They were just like he put his hand in a bucket of commas and threw them at the page, and there they were everywhere. But then he came to my university as a guest speaker, and he read from one of his books, again, and it was a different book, but he speaks in commas. And so then I understood, after hearing him, I understood the pacing of the way his speech is in the books, because we write like we speak, and we don't necessarily know when we use weird words or weird phraseologies or what have you. A copy editor will typically examine spelling, grammar, capitalization, word usage and repetition, dialogue tags, usage of numbers or numerals, POV and tenses, and descriptive inconsistencies, like one page says the guy's hair is blonde and another one says brown. Copy editing ensures that errors like these kinds of things don't happen in the story, and it should be fairly clean by the time it goes forward. Number 5 type of editing is the line editor. Sometimes people use line editing synonymously with a copy editor, but they're not exactly the same thing, though often somebody with the copy editing skills will also have the line editing skills. Line editing, though, specifically focuses on the content and the flow of the prose. And it's also called stylistic editing because it's finding the style, finding the rhythm, finding what works rather than the mechanics like grammar and spelling. It does fall under an umbrella of copy editing. It is just a more specialized thing, kind of like how structural editing falls under developmental editing, but structural editing is just very specific. While a full copy edit has all of the elements I just mentioned above, a line edit would mostly only take into consideration word usage, POV and tense, descriptive inconsistencies, or the rhythm of the sentences, repetition because that's part of the style, and provide more detail or suggestions on strengthening prose or rewriting some sentences for better flow. So number 6 type of editing is proofreading, actually. There's not an actual editor in this name. And proofreading is actually the last phase of editing that your book is going to go through. It is really just like the spell check, grammar check after the copy editor. Because like I said, editing is super hard. Catching all of the inconsistencies, catching all of the grammar mistakes or all of the spelling mistakes or all of the missing words is impossible for any one person, and it can still be impossible for 2 or 3 people. That's why there are usually so many people that work on a book or novel in publication, because we are all human and our brains kind of insert words to make stuff make sense. A proofreader's specific job is just to do that final 100% check. And the proofreader will look at inconsistencies in spelling and style, layout and typography, so that means the layout on the page, any confusing or awkward page breaks or word breaks, and incorrect captioning of illustrations or page numbers in the content. Proofreading should be the last thing that your book goes through before it goes to publication. When you're working with a proofreader, if you're writing when you're working with a proofreader, if you're writing something like fantasy or sci-fi or anything that has weird names or weird spelling or new made-up words, then it is important that you give them a style sheet that kind of lays out what the new words are, the new things you made up, or any misspellings that you did on purpose for the purpose of this world, so that they know that's not a mistake, but actually a characteristic of the universe that they're reading in. The 7th kind of editor that you can come across is a fact checker, and they'll just go through your document if you're doing something historical, if you're doing something nonfiction, if you're doing something that is maybe outside of your expertise and you want to get it a little more accurate, like if you're doing a procedural and you want to make sure that your procedural information for police officers is on par with what is reality, then you would get a fact checker to look through the way that you've written your content to make sure that your facts aren't off. You know, like the author of One of Us is Lying could have had a fact checker check on her use of 4chan. The 8th kind of editor that you could run into in writing is the formatting editor, who will actually just look over the layout and format of your novel and fix it or make adjustments to fit a certain layout for printing or typography. Not everybody uses this. A lot of people don't actually use a formatting editor. The formatting expert editor, just checks typography, margins, chapter headings, and page numbers, and really just focuses on the visual aesthetic of your book. The last type of editor that you will likely never run into unless you're writing nonfiction is the indexer. And index editing is like I just said, it's limited to dense nonfiction and textbooks almost entirely, though some books that have intense world building like Lord of the Rings may have indexing at the end. So I'm not going to get too much into indexing. It is for references in the back of the book, and it really doesn't matter for most fiction authors. So these are the 9 types of editing or editors that you will run into possibly while going through your book processes. And my suggestions, if you can't afford an editor, is to look for some really good people that you would trust to partner with you as either critique partners or editing partners or something like that. Build a relationship with them. Don't just try to ask them to be your free editor, because it is very time consuming. and see if they will do that to help you out. If you can offer a trade of some kind, like read their book and give them feedback, whatever you can offer. I know a lot of people that feel very self-conscious about offering their abilities to proofread or critique. You don't have to offer critique services. You can offer, to do proofreading or to do editing, because everybody does need an editor. Get this, make sure this is stuck in your head before you publish your book, whether it's indie, whether it's not indie. You need to have an editor. A developmental editor will make your book much better than it could have been without somebody else's critical eye of what they see, because they're giving you the first opportunity to show your work to somebody outside of your head, and they can translate to you what came across and what didn't come across before, a bunch of bad reviews of what the frick is happening here. It is so important to have a good editor, to have the best book, to create the best product, and to put the best thing out there. But you don't need to go into thousands of dollars of debt just to do it. That's why I say it is expensive. But do what you can afford. And just remember that it's important. Like, oh my gosh. That's why it's so important to build strong relationships with other people, other writers, because they can recommend you to their friends, or they can be your writing buddy and help you out, and those things. Now, where do you find editing services? Well, you can try out a bunch of websites. I can't offer you any specific websites to reference because they are all pretty much give or take. They are all trial and error to find who you work best with as a person. Who your personality works with, who your writing style works with. You can try Fiverr, you can look for editing specific blogs or people who run editing specific items. You can also find editors at writing conferences. There are editing services that show up at writing conferences, but again, this is going to be you need to do research on the people, on the areas, to see what they work with, if they would work good for you, if they're a reliable source. It's all just iffy. If you are traditionally published, then your publication house will assign you an editor. Your agent will also offer you edits. And so there is that. Just on a specific note, I start looking for a developmental editor maybe after I've revised 2 or 3 times, sometimes 4 times. I try to take my novels as far as I think I can take them on my own before trying to bring a new person in to look at them. Or I at least try to get it to where I think that I know that I want it to be, but then it might be struggling. I might know that it's struggling, but I need another ID. I need somebody else to look at it to give me their feedback so that maybe I can connect whatever those missing dots are that I can feel, but I'm not sure what they are. So I'll make sure that everything in the book is in order, with the hints that I want it to have, with the storytelling that I want it to have, so that somebody's not, giving me feedback that I might already know about the book. I want to have all of my elements in order, and then I give it to somebody else that is 2 or 3, sometimes 4 edits or revisions, just to make sure all of the elements are in there before I hand it to somebody else, just to give me those specific responses that really help me hone in on what is disconnected, where it's slow, and if the characters are, like how the characters are reading. Then I make that edit, and then I basically hand it to a copy editor or another critique partner, almost sometimes a beta reader. And then I make more edits from there, and after getting a little bit of beta reading, then I start moving into the copy edits and the proofreading and getting it ready to go. So usually 2 or 3 groups. I say 2 or 3 groups. Dead and Drive went through so many groups of people. But it depends on how long that book is hanging around, I swear. But that's what I do. It usually goes through cycles of, okay, here are a bunch of edits, now how does it read? Okay, here are a bunch of edits, now how does it read? And then I just end up doing a bunch of edits because I become a better writer with time, and you will too. So anyway, that's all I have to say on editing. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. Enjoy yourself a good book from the links down below, and have yourself a good day and a good weekend. Until next time, don't die. Dear Madam Astra, that's me. We regret to inform you that on August 1st, your employer, Agatha Jane Benedict, owner of the Benedict estate, peacefully passed away in her sleep. Oh, that's so sad. Wait. Let me try that again. Oh my goodness. That's so sad. Yeah, I think I'm ready. With millions of dollars on the line and the opportunity for your every need to be taken care of for life, tell me, is there anything more valuable than that? I didn't think so. Dead End Drive is a dark comedy novel that makes 3 promises. 1, an illustrious estate in Louisiana. 2, an opulent dinner affair for all in attendance. And 3, and most importantly of all, lots and lots of competitive murder. So if you're looking for a cozy book to settle in with for the spooky season, I've only got one question for you. Will I see you at the Will reading?